But yeah, so today I will be talking about autism and mental health. Um, it's no secret that we autistics usually have a higher rate of mental health issues than neurotypicals. For this stream, I'm going to be talking specifically about depression, anxiety, and meltdowns, but also like panic attacks and shutdowns, since these are things that I've dealt with in my life, and it's easier for me to talk about topics I've experienced personally. Um, I think the main reason why we deal with these issues more often than neurotypicals is partially because we're living in a world not made for us. We're constantly fighting against a system that never really gave us much thought until recently, and even now, when they think of us, those thoughts are rarely positive. We have to deal with sensory overload, social anxiety, burnout, and at times a complete disregard of our independence and personhood. Kajira, I feel you. I had a panic attack recently. It was not fun. If we were more accepted and accommodated for, we'd probably be facing a lot less when it comes to these mental health issues. So, when it comes to depression, autistics are 4 times more likely to experience depression than neurotypicals. It's easy to understand why. We often face more bullying, more barriers, and in general, more antagonism. We're seen as different from others, and as such are shunned, mocked, and not listened to. We're still having the issue of people listening more to those who speak over us and promoting things like autism cure, harmful therapies, and inaccurate stereotypes. Autism speaks. As we become
Bless you.
as we become more aware of the fact that these things are happening, the more depressed we get. It's why autistic adults are more likely to experience depression than autistic children. As adults, we're able to see what's actually going on. It doesn't help that we also have a habit of ruminating. We look back on our lives and all the mistakes we've made in the past, and they drag us down. Like the number of times I've made myself depressed because I obsessed over something embarrassing I did like 20 years ago. So, when it comes to autism and depression, there are two types that we have to deal with. There's primary depression, which is depression that has no connection with our autism. Stuff like life stresses and such. A current cause of primary depression for a lot of us right now is the pandemic. It's caused so many problems that depression in everyone honestly feels inevitable. This is a depression that would exist whether or not we were autistic. If someone passes away, if, you know, pet runs away, you know, you lose your job because the company went bankrupt. This is all stuff that has nothing to do with your autism. Basically, like everyone faces. Of course, then there's secondary depression, which is depression experienced because we're autistic. Social rejection, isolation, ableism, and the like. It's depression we wouldn't be facing if we weren't autistic. Autistics aren't the only ones who deal with secondary depression. Basically, any like minority faces it, as well as women, since technically there are more percentage wise there's more women than men, so they can't really be called a number minority, I guess a power minority. Pretty much anyone who can say, I wouldn't be dealing with this depression if I wasn't X. X being, trans, gay, black, etc. Of course, there are certain forms of secondary depression that only neurodivergents deal with, like having a special interest that causes you to be depressed. We don't get to choose our special interests. So if we end up hyperfixating on something that causes depression, it can be really tough. One big problem we autistics have to deal with is that depression can be harder to diagnose in us, since there are some overlapping symptoms. Some of them are things like social withdrawals, low motivation, losing interest in something you like, and problems with eating and sleeping. It's difficult to be able to point to low motivation and tell whether it's depression or executive dysfunction, or being able to tell if you lost interest in something because you're depressed, or your brain has just moved on from that hyperfixation. Not to mention that we tend to show our emotions differently than neurotypicals, or have a lot of trouble identifying our own emotions. So, talking to a professional about our emotions can be really difficult when we don't have any way of describing what we're feeling. So, those professionals who were educated and trained to work with neurotypicals with depression may not know what exactly to look for. It's not often that people are formally trained to work with autistic adults. So finding someone who specializes in both depression and autistic adults, or autism in general, is probably like finding a needle in a haystack. Although it would appear that depression, although depression looks different in autistics and neurotypicals, some of the strategies used to help neurotypicals have been found to help autistics as well. I am going to be talking about. I should probably do a live stream about autistic burnout sometime. Sorry, just reading comments. Sorry. I get distracted easily. So, some of the strategies, social support is a big one. When surrounded, not like literally surrounded, but you have people who love you, listen to you, and do what they can to help you. And I mean, actually help you, not just do what they think will help you. It makes sense that your depression levels would drop when you have people you can lean on. This is true for everyone. Having a good support system of loved ones does wonders for people. I know it's helped me. This includes people online as well. Your support system can be entirely online. Online friends, online support groups, these are valid. It bugs me when people disregard the validity of online connections. Well, I'm happy to see you here, Miriam. Yeah, support systems in schools and workplaces and forms of accommodations also help. It's a lot easier to fight off depression when your needs are being accommodated for and you feel like people actually care about you, because yeah, it can be pretty soul crushing when you're at school or you're at workplace that does not care about you, and is just sort of like, oh, you're not working hard enough? Okay, we're just going to replace you. That can drag anyone down. Now, medication, on the other hand, is different. It would appear that medications for treating depression can have different effects on autistics than they do on neurotypicals. Negative side effects from medications seem to be more common with autistics, such as increased aggression, hyperactivity, and agitation. Not to mention how some medications have completely different results, or absolutely none at all. It's true that every medication works differently for every person, but it seems to be harder to find the proper medication for autistics. And let me just tell you, before I was diagnosed as autistic and they were trying to find the right medications for me, I went through a lot of them. Oh my goodness. It was a complete disaster. Oh my goodness. In the end, more research needs to be done. For some reason, people have been studying depression in neurotypicals for decades, but only recently thought to research in neurodivergence. Go figure. With anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder is the most common comorbidity or co-occurring condition in autistics. I was actually diagnosed with it before I was diagnosed as autistic. More than 20% of autistic adults are diagnosed with it, compared to 8.7% of neurotypicals. OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder, which used to be labeled as an anxiety disorder until the DSM 5 came out, is also fairly common in autistics. While it's no longer labeled as an anxiety disorder anymore, OCD in and of itself, can certainly exacerbate anxiety. Over 17% of autistics are diagnosed with OCD. And it's believed that a large percentage of people diagnosed with OCD are undiagnosed autistics. Again, OCD is something that I was diagnosed with before I was diagnosed as autistic. You know, it's a wonder they didn't find it earlier, but of course, I was diagnosed, 2000 and, oh my gosh, I gotta do math, 13? Yeah, 2003. So a while ago. Then of course there's, social anxiety. A big cause of social anxiety is poor social skills, which is pretty common for us autistics. I can definitely say that for myself. Now, social anxiety doesn't simply mean anxious to socialize. It specifically means a fear of being judged or humiliated. You can be anxious while socializing while not having social anxiety. I was 17 when I was diagnosed. Bam. However, our issues when it comes to social skills can lead to an increase of being judged or humiliated, which can develop into social anxiety. Just want to make that clear. There are other anxiety disorders that I can go over, but let me just say that anxiety is very common in autistics. Studies show that 84% of autistics have some symptoms of anxiety, and 40% have been diagnosed with at least one anxiety disorder. Symptoms of anxiety in autistics can look similar to symptoms that neurotypicals show, such as like restlessness, fatigue, tense muscles, etc. However, there are some symptoms that autistics show that aren't often seen as signs of anxiety, at least not in neurotypicals. Fear of change is already something that many autistics have to deal with, but with anxiety, that fear goes up. autistics with anxiety might fight against any form of change, becoming agitated or even aggressive. Those of us with OCD will find that our OCD gets worse. There may also be an increase in coping mechanisms, such as stimming and losing ourselves in our special interests. These aren't really signs of anxiety that you'd find in a textbook, so it can be harder to see them as being caused by anxiety. One that I was unaware of before, but has been a problem for me recently, is new phobias. In July, a minor earthquake hit my city, and since then, I've had an intense and irrational fear of dying from my apartment building collapsing. Keep in mind that I live on the top floor of an 18-story building. Of course, that means whenever I get a wave of dizziness, this fear pops up into my mind. Is the building falling over? Is it? I look around, nothing else is being affected. Okay, I'm just dizzy. An increase, an increase in the severity of social exhaustion and social hangovers. Social hangovers is another one that I've been dealing with. While I've never been uh, I've never been able to spend a whole lot of time with people, I do often enjoy it, so long as they're the right type of people. Um, you hate heights? Yeah, you get used to it here. There are some buildings, apartment buildings here that go well into the 30s with their floors. It's, they certainly know how to pack people in here. um, However, my increase in anxiety has made socializing a lot more taxing, and I often need more time to recover afterwards. COVID cases have been incredibly low where I live, so we've been able to gather and hang out with friends, although that may change when Chinese New Year hits in February. The Chinese government is trying to urge people not to travel during the holidays, but you know it's going to happen. Anyways, um, separation anxiety is also a behavior that can manifest in autistics because of anxiety. On bad days when my partner has left for work, I've been terrified I'd never see them again. That somehow they die that day, which would just make me panic anytime they took especially long to text back, even though they're a teacher and they can't text me whenever they want. But the rational mind doesn't really have power when anxiety takes over. Much like with depression, anxiety in autistics can be difficult to diagnose. One reason is, again, like with depression, there are overlapping symptoms. Obsessive behaviors, having trouble concentrating, and difficulty sleeping can be caused by both autism and anxiety. Justin, what about rejection sensitive disorder? I don't think I've ever dealt with that. It's something I'd have to research. But yeah, rejective sensitive disorder, that can definitely set off anxiety. Um, there's also the issue of non-speaking autistics who might not be able to communicate their anxiety. So they end up acting out. Um, since it's not really a symptom one thinks of when thinking of anxiety, it may take a long time before people realize what the root cause of their acting out is. Um, then there's just not being able to recognize or put words to the feelings. I know there's a term for that where you can't actually, like, you can't put words to your emotions. You're feeling emotions, but you don't know how to describe them, you don't know how to identify them. There is a word for it. I just can't remember what it is right now. Honestly, if my partner hadn't been suffering from anxiety for months before my anxiety hit, thanks to COVID, it may have taken longer to realize what I was going through. It took until I started having panic attacks for me to realize that things had gotten that bad in the first place. Oh, excuse me. When you can't understand or describe what's going on for one reason or another, it makes it considerably harder for others to know what you're feeling. Honestly, if I'm a lot better at explaining my emotions now, mostly because, well, I married an English teacher. It's sort of, I'd be like, I'm feeling things, but I don't know what they are, and it's just, they would help me find the words, sort of, okay, is it like this? Can you describe it? No. Okay, what about this? Is it like this? Just working through it. And over the years, it's actually really helped me with being able to describe what I am feeling. Um, Not only that, like, anxiety is often like diagnosed with questionnaires and interviews. But so often these are geared towards neurotypicals. Researchers are working on methods of how to identify and diagnose anxiety disorders when it comes to autistics. As more information comes out as to how autistics show anxiety, the easier it will get to diagnose it. Excuse me. Oh, a tickle in my throat. On the other hand, when it comes to anti-anxiety medications and how they affect autistics, there's significantly less information on that. Only small studies have been done, and the conclusions have mostly been that these medications should be used on a case-by-case basis, since we tend to have completely different or very negative reactions to anti-anxiety meds than expected. Again, a lack of research is a big problem here. While I know that medication works differently for everyone, and that it can take time to find the right medication for someone, whether autistic or not, it seems that our reactions to these medications are more wildly unpredictable. It seems that when on anti-anxiety medication, autistics tend to be more hyperactive, impulsive, or develop insomnia, or worse, insomnia if they already have it. Usually selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, uh, or SSRIs, are the first type of medication used to help treat anxiety. But they only seem to be modestly effective, with high rates of negative effects. Cognitive behavioral therapy seems to help treat anxiety disorders in some autistics, but not all of them, especially not autistics who are limited or non-speaking. While more research is being done to help diagnose anxiety in autistics, there doesn't seem to be as much research being put into how to treat it. On the subject of meltdowns, I'm going to be talking about them in regards to anxiety. Oh, okay. Bye, Kierjo. Thanks for coming. Um, since meltdowns can be caused by, you know, sensory overload and stuff like that, I'm just going to be, talking about its relation to anxiety. I'm also going to be discussing panic attacks as well as shutdowns. When dealing with anxiety, it takes so much less to have a meltdown. You're already on edge. Your heart rate is already up, and it's harder to stay focused. For those who don't know, a meltdown is a complete loss of emotional control. The best explanation for a meltdown that I've ever read was that they're emotional avalanches that run their course whether you like it or not. What sets off a meltdown really depends on the person, but when anxiety hits, it shortens the fuse for most people. It's been a while since I've had a full on meltdown, but I'm not un it's not uncommon for me to start feeling the signs of one edging on and having to completely change the structure of my day just to make sure I don't set it off. If I plan to go out to run an errand or spend time with friends, I have to cancel those plans and stay home where I have my music and my games and I can just stim my heart out. I do my best to avoid anything that stresses me out. I remove myself from any situation or remove any stimuli that could have me heading straight into meltdown territory. I dented my bedroom door after having the mother of all meltdowns in 2017. Yeah, I remember one time, my best friend and, old roommate, I had a bit of a meltdown and took it out on the closet door. But yeah, that was interesting. But yeah, I know my ability to just change plans and stay home or remove myself from a stressful situation is a massive privilege. I don't live with anyone that causes me stress, except maybe my cat sometimes. And I don't have a job that I must leave my house for. I got lucky. And I just hope more autistics can have my luck. With panic attacks, it's a lot more complicated than meltdowns. First of all, I'd just like to point out that while panic attacks can be a symptom of an anxiety disorder, they aren't the same thing as anxiety attacks. While they can look similar in some people, they are different. Anxiety attacks can be mild, moderate, or severe, whereas panic attacks are most often severe. Anxiety attacks also build up over time, but panic attacks are immediate and come out of nowhere. Now, with that out of the way, as I said, panic attacks have no build-up. They just happen, and for me, they're scary. I get super dizzy, my face goes numb, my heart starts pounding out of my chest, and sometimes I have trouble breathing and end up hyperventilating. Of course, if I don't have the hyperventilating, people may not even know I'm having a panic attack. Because usually when I'm having a panic attack, I'm not having breathing problems. Because the most common trope with panic attacks is the hyperventilating. And if you're not hyperventilating, people may not know you're having a panic attack. For me, I will get very quiet and very still because I am very dizzy. And I'll have no emotion on my face. And I will just sit there, still, rigid. And it's like, how would anyone know I was having a panic attack? First time I had one in 2020, I thought I was having a heart attack. After the worst of it had passed, I realized that it was a panic attack. And I texted a friend who also has panic attacks and asked them to help me through it. All I can do to try and lessen my panic attacks is with medication and trying to relax more often. Like allowing myself to rest more, a decrease in stress, as well as my meds seem to have decreased my number of panic attacks. Justin, do those include bad thoughts? I think bad thoughts would be less panic attacks and maybe more closer to an anxiety attack. Um, that's just my opinion. I'm no professional. Um, Shutdowns are a partial or complete withdrawal from the world. It's a retreat from the world that's the cause of all the stress and anxiety. It's weird inflection. Anxiety being felt. Um, some autistics stop responding to outside sources, like when someone tries to talk to them. Some autistics, like me, will go nonverbal. Shutdowns are a lot more subtle um, than meltdowns. Sometimes they happen without anyone noticing. Um, Justin, that is what you say about relaxing, but my parents want me to be on a loud boat for hours today. Oh dear. Okay, do you have noise canceling headphones? Maybe, Justin? That may help. Aside from that, I'm not sure. Something that helps you escape? A book? A portable video game? A Switch? Switches are portable.
True, but they also have the hazard of being near water in this situation.
Right. So, yeah, noise canceling headphones would be like on top of my list of what you may want to bring. Um, However, meltdowns uh, can turn into shutdowns. When anxiety is high, it makes sense that one would want to escape. Shutdowns are a way for us to decrease our stress levels. It's a way for us to shut out everything. Um, and recover. Once we've recovered enough, we'll be ready to rejoin the real world. I see it as putting ourselves into a mental cocoon. It's best to just let the shutdown run its course. We'll emerge from our cocoon when we're ready. When it comes to dealing with my own depression and anxiety, my options are limited here in China. I can't go to a therapist since an English speaking therapist would be incredibly hard to find, if there's even one in my area. And calling a therapist in Canada would be difficult, even online with Zoom or something, because of the time zone differences. So I've had to rely heavily on coping techniques and lifestyle changes. I am on an SSRI medication. I'm on Zoloft, which is helping with minimal negative effects. So far, I think the worst ones are weight gain and minor sleep issues, but they aren't bad enough to warrant trying a different medication. And if they keep my panic attacks down, who am I to complain? With my depression, I've been trying my best to stave it off by getting some sunlight every day, as well as taking D tablets. It definitely helps during the winter. I have seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, so in the wintertime I get a lot worse. I also play Animal Crossing every day, which I haven't played today. I need to play it today. Got busy doing other stuff. Um, yes, like, yeah, I'm still playing video game. Like, I'm still playing Animal Crossing. I am that person. I have a lovely island full of blue roses. It's a nice, happy game that brings my mood up. Calling my family every 2 weeks and randomly video calling friends works wonders. I am very lucky that I have so many friends that are night owls. Um, um, it means that there's always a good chance at least one of them is awake. Honestly, just turn stream into gaming stream. Maybe one day I'll just talk about my Animal Crossing.
Oh, no, you could always get me to play a random thing while you talk over it.
That's fair. Well, Finnos, day 533. Still can't catch that spider. I don't mean to brag, but I have caught every fish and every bug. And in March, I will be catching the last 2 sea creatures. And I will have everything but the art section of the museum done. Sorry, I just had to brag. Honestly, just having a support system of people helps so much to manage my depression and Animal Crossing. And of course, there's my cat Cora, who's both a wonderful snuggler who keeps my depression down and a major pain in the butt who keeps my frustration up. He has 2 modes. It all depends on what mood he's in, really. Oh, and, my partner, I guess they help too.
Yay!
I guess. I remember during my first year here, depression hit me so hard because I felt so isolated. But now that I'm settled and have friends here and keep in regular contact with my friends and family back home, it's really helped deal with that isolation and depression. Just in my coping is playing JRPGs. JRPGs are pretty awesome. My favorite, not to be like, that 90s kid, but my favorite is probably like Chrono Trigger or Earthbound. I love them so much. They're so good. Anyways, with my anxiety, your partner's your stim toy.
Wow.
With my anxiety, I've been doing my best to reduce it in a few ways. The first is to not push myself too hard. If I need to take a break, I take a break. Right, Justin? Chrono Trigger and Earthbound are awesome. I used to forget to eat lunch because I would be so focused on my work that I wouldn't even take a break to eat. I've since stopped doing that because I have medication that I have to take with every meal, and that helps me remember to take lunch. But I've also learned to forgive myself for not being productive every second of every day. I've also been doing yoga, which I know isn't for everyone, but I wanted to find an activity that would get my body moving, but wouldn't get my heart pounding too hard since anxiety had brought my heart rate up. I used to do cardio, but yeah, that would get my heart rate up. So I did yoga. I'm like, hey, this is calming. It's not easy, but but yeah, even if you're not into yoga, just learning the deep breathing exercises can help calm you down. I used it to I've used it to fight off spikes in anxiety, especially when I'm trying to fall asleep or oncoming panic attacks. For some reason, when I lie down in bed to go to sleep, that's when like my heart really starts pounding, or it's just when I notice it because I'm not doing other stuff. It's interesting how just breathing slow and deep can help with calming you down. I've also cut back on caffeine since caffeine can get the heart going and cause an anxiety spike. I don't drink coffee, but I do drink tea and pop. So I've tried to keep my caffeine intake to 1 or 2 caffeinated drinks a day. Doesn't always work that way, but hey, I am trying. So, is there anything you would like to add as my partner living with me with dealing with my mental health?
Well, it's one of those things where, with both of us having anxiety issues, especially I know mine were a direct result of COVID and what I have now dubbed the week from hell last February. Um, Being aware of it and being aware of what are the signs of oncoming anxiety and attacks and that kind of thing is something that has slowly become kind of a forefront for both of us. When Teresa says that, how would you even know I am having an anxiety attack? There's been multiple times where I look over, see the freeze, and I'm like, oh, and I just set up a spot for them to relax, try to help them calm down, or just at the very worst, I'm getting the lorazepam as the shut off button if things go full blown and it's too much and can't return from. But Teresa's done the same thing for me. Paying attention to me, like I have the very obvious increased breath happen when mine starts coming on. And so I'm very obvious, but then again, everything I do is big and obvious and apparently overblown to the point where my students are like, "What's wrong? What's wrong with what's wrong with him? Why does he always have his shoes off?" I do it like once or twice to get their attention as a joke, and apparently I am very known for that. But it's the same kind of thing. See the phrase?
Not sure what you mean, Wolfenose.
I might have said.
Oh, they said see the freeze, not phrase.
Oh, my apologies. Yes, see the freeze when the lockup happens and Teresa just goes completely still. Yes. To me, that stands out because Teresa is a very, like, lively, active, alive person, always kind of in motion. So when that stops, to me, it stands out. But it's the same kind of thing. Um, Being able to acknowledge it and be aware of what the anxiety effects and triggers are for those around you is pretty important, as well as your own, because if you can feel it coming on, then you have a chance of doing something about it. Now, to be fair, uh,
I'm so sorry, Justin. When I go still, my mom says I'm trying to get pity points. Oh, I've dealt with people like that. I am so sorry.
F yo couch. Pardon me. No. Trying to get pity points is what a student who forgot to hand in the assignment is like, oh, no, yes, computer had problems. I'm sending a message past midnight. Can I give to you? Going still in the middle of the day when you're feeling an onset of anxiety happens. It just happens. I don't have the same reaction. I don't have the same situation, but it's a symptom that comes out. I know for a fact that I've had a few kids in my classroom who were clearly on the spectrum, and when some of them get really stressed, what do? They freeze up. Yeah. Freezes up. Exactly. It's not about pity. You would much rather not be experiencing this than have a damn section of pity. And in fact, pity would be much more useful because then they'd at least be trying to go, oh no, what's wrong? Can I help? Maybe. At least that would be my perspective. And yeah. So again, I'm very good at ranting, so I'm going to pass it on back.
Uh, Thank you so much for that. But yeah, I know my partner has helped me so much. They're the one who helped me with figuring out coping mechanisms to deal with my depression and my anxiety and stuff like that.
I'm very good at thinking about and reflecting on things, considering that's kind of my job a lot.
Yes. Um, so just big thank you from them. So, of course, we are entering the reading email section. In the doobly-doo of my video and live stream, there is an email that you can email me if you want me to read out your question and answer it out here on the live stream. Also, did you know the description of the YouTube video is called the doobly-doo? I absolutely love that fact. Anyways, I'm going to take a drink of water and then read it. So, hello. I'm super happy to be mailing you. And hi to future me watching the stream when you are reading this. Anyway, my main point is to tell people when I have ASD. For those who don't know, that means autism spectrum disorder. I tend not to tell people up front, like, hey all, autistic here, like that. I like to mention it during a conversation, and I kind of bring up that I'm autistic as part of the, as part of the conversation. But should I tell everyone? Like, if I want to date someone, should I mention it really early on? Or should I wait until we're closer to mention it so they don't leave me just because I'm autistic? Same with job employers. Should I mention it when I'm being interviewed after I get the job or just never at all? My parents love to mention how it is my superpower, yet love to keep it a secret from people when I'm pretty open about it. My mom said being openly autistic in the late 2000s was like being openly gay in the 80s. Maybe they see something that I don't. Thank you very much for the email. I really appreciate it. So, this is something that I see asked a lot. I'm really open about being autistic, but I don't have to worry about telling my date since I'm already married and I don't have an employer. I don't remember when I actually told my partner I was autistic, but I wasn't really open about it when we first got together. When it comes to telling friends or family or just casual acquaintances, that's really up to how comfortable you are at being open to them about being autistic and if you feel they need to know. When it comes to dating, it can be a bit more complicated. I'd say it really depends on the person and how well you two connect. Perhaps bring up autism in a casual conversation to see how they react to it in general. Maybe bring up a character from a show you like that's autistic or suspected to be autistic and see if they react to the subject of autism positively or negatively. If it seems like they see autism as something more negative, you may want to wait a bit and see if you two click. If it seems like the relationship is really progressing positively, you can bring it up. I wouldn't wait too long, though, maybe within the first few months. if they ask you why you behave in a certain way and it's because of your autism, I think it would be best to just be open and honest about your being behavior being an autistic trait. If when you tell them you're autistic they react poorly, it may be best to just end the relationship if they don't. Like, if they don't end the relationship. You don't want to end up in a toxic relationship where your partner sees you as lesser because of your autism. With your job employer, I'd say again, it depends. Um, First, check the anti discrimination laws in your country. If a prospective employer doesn't hire you, they aren't going to say, oh, it's because of your autism. But it's always good to know your rights ahead of time. Also, in some countries, an employer must provide accommodations if they have a certain number of employees. This is incredibly important information if you do require accommodations. I think the best course of action would to not reveal that you're autistic unless you need to. If accommodations are a must, it may be best to be open about being autistic. This may turn out well, it may not. You can also search for jobs that are specifically requesting autistic employees. I got a job that way once. It didn't work out well, but that was not my boss's fault. But still. um, yeah. When it comes to your mom saying that being openly autistic in the late 2000s was like being openly gay in the 80s, I'm going to have to disagree with her. Well, people weren't as open about being autistic 10 to 20 years ago. It was usually more a fear of not being accepted, although not always. There were other fears as well. Whereas being openly gay in the 80s could lead you to being legally fired, assaulted, and in some countries arrested or even killed. Not to mention that the AIDS epidemic was going on in the 80s, which increased stigma greatly. In the late 2000s, no one was saying that being autistic was a sin or a crime. Yes, autistics were and still are discriminated against, but not to the same degree. There are rights that we're still fighting for, and there are autistics who get attacked and murdered, usually by their parents. There are still plenty of injustices that need to be fought by the autistic community. But when it comes to being openly gay or autistic, what you're um what your mom is probably talking about is the social stigma. And I assure you that we're not even close to being as hated as the public hated gays in the 80s. I can't say why your mom is more secretive about your autism. There could be a plethora of reasons, but I really feel like she's making a mountain out of a molehill. I hope that helps. I hope that answers all of your questions. And if you want me to read out your email, if you want me to read out your email, email me. The email address is in the description. Yeah.
Now, as a slight divergence of one thing that Teresa did not cover, there is one location in which I firmly believe that you should be very open with regards to your autism, and that is in the school environment. At least in most of the public school systems, a lot of them in countries that have mental health that recognizes autism and tries to assist it in some way or make accommodations, the schooling system will often try to provide extra support. Now, obviously, that is absolutely not going to be the case everywhere, but a lot of countries around the world do have, in the school environment, tools, materials, and more people and resources in place to provide support, even if all it is simply assisting you with coping mechanisms or volunteering extra time, that is something that does need to be considered. That is the one area in which I would be open about it, because that would be the time that you are developing, the time your children are developing, and the time where that assistance may be most needed in terms of just being able to uh, accept yourself and accept your limits and realize it's okay to get that help, when so often it gets stigmatized out of you. Like, I've seen it from so many kids here in China because they don't offer proper support. I do everything I can, but I'm one teacher, and if that kid doesn't already like you because you're not the one that you are told to go to for that help or support, it can be a real challenge to really do more than just be there for them when they're in your class. So that is the one time I would recommend. Try to make sure you're as open as you safely can be.
Thank you for that addition. I wouldn't have thought of that, seeing as, I'm not a teacher. So, as always, now is the time. We're getting to the end of the stream, and it's time to thank my patrons. Of course, as always, big thank you and big digital hug to my dad, who's always supported me. A big thank you to Dominic. Not sure how comfortable he'd be with a digital hug, but if he is, digital hug to you. Same with Nick. If Nick wants a digital hug, sending it your way. Thank you so much. $10 patrons. Just so awesome. And of course, all of my other patrons. It is getting to the point where I might have to start making separate slides because the list is getting long, and it makes me so happy to see it. I really appreciate your support. So yeah, thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. I always love seeing people here, and I saw some new names, which is always amazing. I will be chopping this up and releasing the pieces as well as the full one. Those will be available on Wednesday. If you want the video of the live stream before Wednesday, they're available to my $5 and $10 patrons when an hour before I release my Sunday comic. So yeah, link to my Patreon below. Again, as I always say, only become a patron if you can afford it. Well, if you want to be a patron and if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, please use your money for better things. All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Bye.